Thanks very much for having me here in Vienna, beautiful city. Thanks to Oratio for having me. Thanks, Maggie, for the intro. And thank you all for being here. So you're all here because you're interested in bots, I hope. And as you're probably well aware, Microsoft has their bot framework. Now, I'm an engineer, actually, within the DX team. I'm based in London. So I'm a real live engineer. I've been living and breathing this now for about 9 months or so. So I've worked with a lot of very large companies now to deliver bots that you'll start to see coming out into the market very soon. So I'm going to give you kind of a brief overview of what we got at Microsoft in terms of bots, maybe some guidance on how we put together great bots, and where we see the market going, okay? So why bots, why now? We've had this a couple of times this morning. I think we're all aware of this. We're at a point in convergence right now where, for the first time in history, we've got this kind of perfect kind of situation where we have the messaging platforms. You're all probably using, I see so many of you using Slack here today, which is great. I use Slack in my team. I used to work at Skype, so there's another messaging platform that I'm sure you've got a lot of experience with. What we're seeing more and more, and we saw that graph this morning again, is that people are using the messaging platforms more than they're starting to use the web, more than they're starting to use some social sites as well. In terms of engagement, the amount of screen time that we're seeing people, particularly the millennials, particularly those folks much younger than me, they're almost exclusively using their phones, and I guess they're well represented here, are almost exclusively using their phones as messaging platforms. So this is something that we want to go to. We want to meet these people where they are. We don't want to drag them into our apps or drag them onto the web or something like that where they don't want to go. So that's one of the things that we're seeing. The other thing that we're seeing, probably the key enabler here, of course, is the development of what we're calling artificial intelligence. I prefer to call it machine learning. I think artificial intelligence gives perhaps the wrong, sometimes, impressions. It's more machine learning. So we've got a whole bunch of new techniques that are available to us now. We've got the compute power available to us, of course. GPUs now are available in the cloud. You can do these kind of learning solutions very easily now. We also have lots and lots of data. If you're running or working with any kind of software company, if you have any kind of software platform, you should be collecting as much data as you can. Even your logs, even your web server logs or anything like this. This is all very valuable stuff that you will one day be able to mine once you figure out how to. I promise you, I've seen it done so many times. And we're making them very, very easy to use. This is something that Microsoft is actually, I think, doing very well at. We've got these cognitive services. You may have heard of them. They're simple REST APIs that you can hit that will do magic stuff for you. I mean, it's magic in a box. It really is. Put data in, get rainbows out. It's awesome. And of course, the cloud is the place that we kind of host all of this stuff. We've got that now. It's very easy to deploy these solutions. You don't have to go out and buy a truck's worth of computers to run all this stuff on. The cloud for us, of course, looks like Azure. We have a slightly different offering than most of the other guys. We're doing platform as a service. It's actually a great deal easier, I think, personally, to roll these kind of services out into a platform as a service kind of place, into kind of cloud, rather than it is to have to configure VMs and stick them up. But, I guess a lot of you guys are doing that too, and we're okay with that. We've got lots of things that you can use. And the bots that we come up with these, that with the convergence now, we've got all these bots. For some reason, every example that I see seems to be a pizza ordering bot. I've got no idea why. I promise you that we're seeing lots and lots of different kind of things. It's not just about ordering consumer goods. It's about examining your logs, your user behavior. It's about looking at sales forecasts and things like this. We're seeing great big accounting firms starting to think about conversational interfaces as a way to interrogate their data. So what bots are great at, I mean, bots are not a magic bullet. They're not a universal cure-all, right? They are good at some things. They're not so great at other things. They really are great at scaling conversations, okay? So you're able to kind of very quickly, with one bot, deploy that and have conversations with thousands and thousands of users. You don't have to employ all these customer service representatives. And actually, you're not really, in most of the kind of useful scenarios that I've seen, we're not putting customer service reps out of a job. We're actually helping them to scale better. We're reducing the waiting times. Everyone's running their bank, and we're sorry, but they're always busy, right? They always have abnormally high waiting times. We're incredibly busy right now at 2 o'clock in the morning, and you'll have to wait 15 minutes. So bots are one way that you can get those waiting times down and please your customers. They're great at automating routine transactions. I've seen bots that do things like continuous deployment. If you're a developer, you probably know what that is. Bots that will automatically build and deploy your builds to the cloud through a conversational interface. And as a developer, you might just say simply, deploy this branch, and off it goes and does it, and has a conversation with you about, what's the key that I need, just makes this kind of thing much more frictionless when you actually go to deploy these things. And also, as we see in the messaging engagement, bots are great at going where your users are now, and will increasingly be over the years. But bots are not, as I said, some magic AI thing that we can suddenly start having conversations with. These aren't HAL from 2001, they aren't that kind of thing. They're not great at solving the Turing test, which is, this guy here is a British computer scientist from about 70 years ago who basically defined something called the Turing test, which is if you can talk to a bot and you can't tell if it's a human or not, then we're going to call that artificially intelligent. We're not there yet. We're getting there, though. So the three pillars that Microsoft basically have that form our bot offering are the bot builder, first and foremost. This is the SDK. This is what the developers will use. This is the thing that will actually run. You'll deploy, and it will run in the cloud for you. We've got a couple of SDKs there. The Node.js, which I'm guessing, looking at all the Macs in this crowd, mostly you guys will be interested in. We've also got the .NET stuff, and we've also got a REST interface for if you want to do kind of wacky integrations with some perhaps more raw kind of integrations there. It's very simple to use. I use it a lot. We do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. We have lots of support for things like rich attachments. It's not just about text. There's graphics, and here we call them hero cards. So you can imagine when a user's interacting with a bot, especially if they're on a mobile, they might not really want to type everything that they say. If we're just giving them a couple of options, let's just throw a card up and a button and let them just press the button. It's a lot quicker way of interaction. We've got the emulators, and we've got command line ways of to bots and things like that. We also have the cognitive services, and I'm going to talk much more about those in a little while. To the side of that, we have the developer portal. This is kind of your one-stop shop for configuring bots. You may be aware that the Microsoft Bot Framework actually supports many, many different channels. We've got Facebook Messenger and Slack, and Skype, of course. We've got direct integrations if you've got an app that's on a phone or something like that. We've got Kik, we've got Telegram, we've got Twilio. I can't remember them all. There's about 10 right now, and there are more coming. So that's one of the unique things, actually, that Microsoft Bot Framework does. It allows you to deploy directly into all of these channels. You don't have to do your own integrations for each of the channels. The Skype channel comes auto-configured. There's a web chat control. Again, the direct line API. It's very fast, it's very scalable. And also, uniquely, we have the bot directory. So we own one of the major messaging properties, Skype. I used to work at Skype. Great product, great messaging platform. We can put you directly in the Skype directory, for instance, and your bot will appear. Any Skype user around the world can now discover your bot. Discoverability is going to be a real issue. You probably already know this if you write apps. Finding an app, finding something that's going to do something for you is a real challenge these days. So having a little help from Skype there in terms of the directory and the bot directory in general might be something that could really accelerate your kind of market penetration. And then we've got the big hitters, the stuff here, cognitive services. This is AI. This is machine. I just said that. I shouldn't have said that. Sorry, it's machine learning. So I think we heard from Christoph this morning about what Watson are doing in that space. It's very interesting. They're doing some awesome stuff. This is roughly in that space. Machine learning. We've got lots of things that will do natural language processing for you, real-time transcription and translations, speech to text, sentiment analysis, which is something that perhaps a bot might be peculiarly suited for. Vision and face detection. You don't just have to talk with text. You don't just have to use buttons. You can actually send bots a picture. And we have object recognition APIs that you can use to figure out what they're doing. Imagine a maintenance contract. Can you send me a picture of the object that you're talking about? Oh, yeah, we know what that part is straight away. We have an engineer in your area. These kind of scenarios that you can do like that. Sentence diagramming, again, falls in the natural language models. Web language, parsing, and a bunch of stuff more. There's far too many to talk about, to list today, but we'll give you an overview. So let's just expand a little bit about the bot builder. This is kind of roughly what it looks like when you're an actual developer. If this looks a lot like Ubuntu, it is, by the way. I use Bash on Windows. Vim is my main editor. So, because I see so many Macs here, you don't have to start Visual Studio up to start to use this stuff. If you dump that into an editor and run it, that's a bot. That runs right now. You can do this in about 5 minutes. We are looking now at, we're looking basically for regular expressions in this one. And this is a very simple bot, obviously, but this is about how much it takes you to get going. You can get going in about 5 minutes. The npm install is probably the longest bit of, the longest you'll have to wait here. As I said earlier, it's not just about text. We have these cards. We have a component that sits in the cloud for you called the bot connector. So this is probably Skype. We sent this back to Skype. This is giving you all these great cards that you can use to engage your users. The bot connector will actually do the translation for you. So we talked about all these channels that we have. We've got SMS, we've got email as well, by the way. You don't have to write this many times. You don't have to write each of these for Skype or Slack or all these different channels. It will just translate directly for you and render it in the best and most appropriate form for the channel that we're hitting. All of this stuff is on GitHub. You may not know, but Microsoft right now is the largest contributor of open source software to GitHub, which is an amazing change. This is something that's happened in the last 3 years. I'm an engineer at Microsoft. It's real. I've seen it happening. We genuinely are here now, finally, in the open source world. Just a little bit more about the developer portal here. So it's really, really simple to use. If you wanted to add Slack, for instance, all you have to do is go off and get your developer keys, click the button there, fill a few forms in. It's done. You're on. It's working. And as I said earlier, we've got the bot directory here. For example, I don't know if you're using Skype and you haven't seen it yet, you'll have seen this new icon appear, the bot. If you click on that, what you're looking at is contacts that are bots. So go and have a little play with that maybe this afternoon, and you'll see the kind of things that are available already. Now, this is the big stuff. So this is the kind of stuff that we at Microsoft kind of envisage as really kind of driving the kind of bot interactions that you probably are looking for, that people probably think about when they think about bots. Already with the bot SDK that we saw earlier, we can do these very structured kind of interactions based on regular expressions and keywords and key phrases. If you really want to start talking to users in the way that users speak to each other, then these are the tools that we've got to help you. We've got things that will help you with language, with speech understanding, with vision understanding, with knowledge graphs. We're seeing knowledge graphs become something that people are becoming increasingly interested in. As Maggie said earlier, we acquired LinkedIn. We have a really good graph there that your business users might well be interested in having a look at some point. And also we've got Bing search. Now you may not actually be aware, but Bing actually powers a huge number of search inquiries for other people in other products. So although you might go to some other web search, I heard they are available, you actually probably daily use Bing, and you just don't know it because it's in some other application. And actually, a lot of the kind of stuff that we're doing here in cognitive services really has come out of the research work that's been happening at Bing, and also at Microsoft Cambridge, Microsoft Research in Cambridge in the UK, where I'm from. And a lot of this kind of magic stuff is now starting to become commercialized, democratized, easy to use, easy to understand. So yeah, cognitive services. Mostly it's magic boxes that do ML stuff. You don't actually have to understand how this works. You don't have to be a data scientist to make use of this. What I'm showing you here is just a very, very simple example of sentiment analysis. So I'm really depressed, which I'm not, by the way, but it's a sentence that you might send to a sentiment analysis endpoint, and it's bringing you back a score of a low score. It's thinking this is a negative sentiment. This guy is not feeling good. You think about the kind of interactions and engagements that might drive with the chatbot. How did you feel about your experience at the conference today? I thought it was great. Okay, great, high sentiment score. The way we think about bots and the way we develop for bots, it's not the traditional model. It's not the traditional paradigm of true or false, yes or no. There's always going to be this kind of spectrum of experience that people are going to express to you, from happy to sad, from delighted to disgusted, this kind of thing. One of the key things that I've learned over the last few months when we're dealing with bots, and especially when we're dealing with these kind of cognitive services, is that you need to start designing right now for this kind of ambiguity. You need to we're not going to get true or false. We're going to get some score on a spectrum. Just so just keep that in mind when you're starting to design these kind of systems. Most of the cognitive services that we do have are all available behind simple RESTful interfaces. You can do this with curl or wget or any of these tools right now, and you can use sentiment analysis within about 5 minutes. They have mostly generous free pricing tiers. We're not doing this for the good of our health or just for it to be happy campers or anything like that. We are ultimately going to make some money out of this stuff, but the pricing is actually very good. We also have very good generous free pricing tiers that you can do your development and your testing and all this kind of stuff on, no problem. These services are also not just for bots, by the way, so you can consume them from any of your web apps, anything that you've got already on devices in your own organizations. So this is just kind of an overview of the kind of services that we have got. I've gone over it a few times before, so I'm not going to delve too deep into this. But the two things that are probably most interesting for us as bot writers are the language understanding and the text analytics stuff. And we saw earlier Christoph from IBM talking about entities and intents. Same kind of thing for us too. We've got this service Lewis, which basically does natural language understanding for you. It's the same kind of process. Define an intent, what you want to do. I want to make a bank transfer. I want to order a pizza, this kind of thing. And then you start to define entities within that thing. So that might be an amount. If it's a bank transfer, it might be the pizza, it might be the topping or something like that. This is very common, actually, by the way, in this kind of natural language understanding task. Teach Lewis where the entities are. Train it, give it lots and lots of utterances. Actually, you don't need to give it that many before it's got a pretty good model already. About 3 is good enough so far, which is pretty impressive. If any of you have got experience with ML and data science, you'll understand that normally we're used to having to have data sets of millions and millions and millions of records and having them all labeled and all this kind of stuff. We don't have to do this. Just give it 3 example sentences, and you've probably already got a model that you could deploy. And here's an exact example of this. This is me actually training this model. So I added a new intent, which was to convert teaspoons, tablespoons, liters to pints, if you're from a backward place that still deals with pints, like I am. And so it only took me three example sentences here to teach now the difference between these two intents. So it actually is very, very simple to use. We actually tend to find the product managers tend to use this, so that's how simple it is in reality. General guidance for using Lewis for this kind of thing is not hard, but there's a couple of things that will help you to be successful. Keep the domains quite specific. Don't try and write a bot that solves all your possible business problems. Think about having language models that deal with one particular task or a focused set of tasks. Train that model and have something else to do the pizza ordering. Yeah? And have a model there that's trained to do pizza ordering. Keep the intents distinct. So pay someone and pay a group or pay a business. That's not really a distinct enough intent. There's going to be a lot of confusion and ambiguity there. Try to avoid that if possible. Don't confuse intents with entities. That's fairly straightforward. So the intent is the verb, the doing thing. The entity is the noun, the object that you want to do it to. Larger training sets do give better results. That's true. Probably about 400 or 500 is a good sweet spot, but you really don't need to go that high. As I said, 3 is about the minimum. 20, 30, 40, round about there. Everyone can write 20, 30, 40 sentences in an afternoon. But given the power of what you're actually getting here, it seems like a reasonable investment in time. And as I said earlier, as I hinted at earlier, design for confidence. Design for this idea that, things are not always entirely unambiguous. That occasionally the bot is going to have to come back to you and say, can you help me out here? Disambiguate that for me. Did you mean that? And that shouldn't be surprising, actually, because what we're trying to do here is do natural language understanding, okay? Now, every conversation that you have every day, probably at some point is, sorry, I didn't hear that. Did you mean X, not Y? We do that all the time. So if we're expecting bots to kind of do much better than that immediately, then perhaps that's something that we might get better at in the future. But right now, the best computers on the planet, which are these things in our heads, can't do this. So design for that. Expect that to come up. And I can't emphasize this enough, actually. Use telemetry. Understand how your bot is actually talking to other people, where the gaps are in its understanding. Feed this back into telemetry, have a regular kind of look at this stuff, and then train your models better. It's highlighting gaps for you, where your models perhaps are not well trained. So all that stuff to think about. Now, I'm just going to finish with a quick example of something that we've already got, which is a potted example, which does some real heavy lifting stuff for you. And you can go off and use today. You can actually put a bot out today that will do this. This is the Q&A Maker, which is a service that we're offering. It's made by a team out of India. Microsoft, of course, has global reach. We have 50,000 developers across the planet working on this kind of stuff. Let's give it, this is the example scenario. The thing that I'm solving here is automating fact-style content. So every customer service kind of scenario has this, where maybe 40, 50, 60% of the calls they take, the answer is on the fact. So, is there some way that we can perhaps triage them, have them go through the fact stuff first before they actually get to a real-life, costing money human? Here is a service that will do this for you in a couple of hours. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to publish the fact content that you see right there, which is on the web. I didn't even have to structure it in any particular way. I literally just give this thing the URL of the fact content. It will actually crawl that as well. So if there are links, multiple pages, it will actually crawl all of that stuff, extract the questions and the answers. This is a field that you're going to see a lot of, information extraction, particularly as you start to go into the agent kind of scenarios. So far, we're just talking about bots. 2-3 years down the line, I think we're going to be having conversations about agents that are able to broker conversations with bots. My bet right now is that in 2 to 3 years' time, the majority of bot conversations are actually going to be bot to bot. I'll buy you all a pint if that's not true. So all we did was give it a URL. We clicked next, and now here's the training interface for this. Looks very simple. Anyone can use it. You ask a question. It gives you the answer. I haven't done any training yet. It's already answered my question correctly. That's pretty cool, right? If it wasn't the right question, if I didn't like the answer that it gave me, I have an option to train here on the left. I can choose something that I would rather it had said, and it'll adjust the weights in its own model, and the next time I ask that question, this is the answer that I preferred would be given to me. I can also ask the question in very different ways. We understand that there are 100 different thousand ways of asking the same question. We can give alternative ways of asking that question on the right there. So we go through this a couple of times, we train it, and we get something that we can actually integrate directly into a bot. So we're giving a REST API. This is actually the URL of this bot right now that is available to answer all your questions about the Microsoft Bot Framework. I made this 2 days ago, and it took me 30 minutes. Now, I've had a bit of practice with this kind of stuff, but really, 30 minutes to an hour to service all of your fact content? You might have hundreds and thousands even of questions like this. We can do this for you in about half an hour. So this, if you're kind of not really sure, if you don't have right now a scenario directly that's applicable to bots, well, maybe this is something that you can use to get going, to get used to this stuff and get into this space. So I'm just going to finish up. That's really the end of my technical content, and I'm just going to finish up just by kind of reminding us all that really this is a process right now. I mean, this is 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when I graduated computer science. One of my classmates was making something called a web browser, and I said, what's that? I had no idea what that was. This is 1994, something like that. That's where we were there. Now we're at this incredible stage where everything is the web underpins our everyday life. I think the same thing, we're going to see the same thing for bots, okay? We're moving from a situation where you had these very simple ELIZA bots. Hopefully most of you kind of know what ELIZA was. We're going to move through Cortana and bots, and what we're going to end up with, I hope, anyway, is the Star Trek computer, this general purpose computing platform that just kind of exists up here somewhere, and we just walk through our lives every day and talk to it. So in summary, Microsoft have a great bot SDK that you can use. It hits many channels for you. It's backed up by these world-class cognitive services. We're still learning what a great bot is, but I'm going to recommend to you that you think about mixed media. You think about pictures and cards and graphics and buttons as well as text. They should be domain-specific, keep it tight, and they should be context-aware. Now, that's a problem that we'll talk about next year. So, thanks, everyone. That's all I got.